Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Creative Adventure Podcast, an artist's guide to modern freelancing. Put down your sword, put down your axe, close your software, whatever you do. We have a guest today. I'm introducing my friend Kyle Wlodyga. He is a toy designer. So before we get started, Kyle, what weapon are you holstering or putting away in a D&D universe? What do you normally bring to battle?
Um, well, I mean, I played forever, and so I've played all kinds of things. But right now, current campaign, I have a Gloomstalker Ranger, so I'm putting away the crossbow,
Love it. All right.
de-stringing it, whatever you want.
Okay, cool. Are you playing 5th edition or 3.5 or
We are playing 5th edition, not 2024 just yet. Like 4th edition, I think 2024 has some controversial changes for gameplay, which I'm not super stoked on. But luckily, D&D Beyond lets you go back to legacy rules if you wish, if you like those better. So we are currently doing 5th edition. Decided to jump just yet.
Cool. All right. Well, this is basically a sort of breakdown to try and get people to think about freelancing as like an art, a craft, in addition to being a professional business. Like we are artists,
Sure.
and you are an artist. You're a toy designer. You went to school for art and illustration, and with that, can you just tell me tell I know your story, but
Sure.
start with your art education and how that led you to be a toy designer at Super Seven.
Oh man, kind of a long and winding road to get there. So I'll try and be succinct-ish on that. I like to tell people that I sort of Forrest Gumped my way into toy design, and most people who I know in this industry didn't really plan on being in the toy industry either. It's all sort of like a prison break, you can get in one way, but then they patch the hole behind you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different way. But I went to casting for
Mm-hmm.
2008 to 2013, the super senior, 5 years. And I said illustration with a business minor in entrepreneurship as well, just so I have a little backup. Gives me a baseline business knowledge so that I'm not just going into the art world with armed nothing but other than my pen. So did that. I studied actually to do comic book covers and illustrations as my exit portfolio, but I very quickly realized that there's just no money in that unless you are insanely fast. It is about quantity, not so much quality, which is not to say that there's quality work out there. Love comics. That's a huge part of who I am, but it wasn't going to work out. I'm not that fast. I am slow-ish. So when I was getting ready to graduate, I was looking for internships because you needed one to graduate. And our mutual friend, Daniel Adop, invited me to a Magic the Gathering draft tournament at his house. This was 2012, late 2012. And at the time, he was living with another one of our mutual friends, a guy named Ben Stoll. He was his roommate at the time.
Love Ben.
And yeah, Ben is the best. I miss that guy. But we were playing Magic and hanging out and all that stuff, and just sort of get to talking and telling Ben about what I was doing. He goes, "Oh well, we kind of need an internship for our stuff. Like, why don't you come in?" And so sent Ben my resume, and they wanted to talk to me, and so I got to go into a little place called Cryptozoic because Ben was the lead game designer at Cryptozoic or something like that at the time on their or TCGs, and got to talk to Corey, who was the chief creative officer over there, and they gave me an internship, and it was kind of the gateway into getting into just the entertainment industry. I didn't really know, I knew that comics would have been cool to do, but I knew that I couldn't afford to just take any opportunity that was was presented to me, if it was art related or whatever. When I went into that office, I was like, this is the place. They've got all this cool stuff, all these cool people. They do cool things. This is it. So I did that for about 6 months. And while I was there, I sat next to another mutual friend. Jags and I have a lot of another mutual friend, George Nadeau, who was the art acquisition manager there at Cryptozoic. And when my internship ended, he and I kept in contact. And he hired me for a couple of freelance projects, mostly on sketch card projects. I think I did Adventure Time and maybe a Walking Dead too. I don't remember. But those are really cool opportunities, and I got that just from talking to George and sitting next to him, being nice. And another maybe year or two passed after that, and George called me because he had a temp job doing data entry, just scanning in all those cards that people drew, the sketch cards. And so I did that for a month, and I think that's when you and I finally connected. It was in that short period of time too, for the first time. But when I had that job, I sat next to Jeff Parker, who was another mutual friend, and he was the creative director of the then fledgling creative collectibles department. And he and I got talking Star Wars and He-Man and all the toys we collected, that kind of stuff. And I didn't even realize that toys was kind of a career option. Like, I obviously knew that somebody had to make them, but I never even thought of it. And so my contract with George ended after a month, and the next day Jeff took me to lunch and started giving me freelance work, working on toys with him. And about 6 months after that, he brought me in to the department full time, and I've been working in toys ever since. So it's really just kind of talking to people about the things that I'm passionate about, that they are mutually passionate about, and forming a genuine connection, and the opportunities come.
So it sounds like with a lot of your growth in the entertainment industry, you did your best to show up to things where there were going to be like-minded people in the industry, and just put yourself in situations where opportunities could arise. And it didn't seem like you really expected anything in return. Like, you played Magic, I'm assuming, so you just played Magic and it just happened to turn out.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I did not go there thinking, oh, I'm gonna get an internship out of this. It was, I'm gonna go drink a lot of beer and play Magic with friends.
You put yourself out there though, which is
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a lot about not saying no to stuff within reason though. Like, don't do meth or whatever, or all that stuff. But not necessarily being so focused on, no, my degree's in this, I have to do this because that's what I know and what I can do. But it's like, yeah, but you need to maybe widen your viewpoint a little bit so you can see where those opportunities are.
So I'm curious, when you did that that Magic opportunity and the chat with George and Jeff, what did your portfolio look like when you had those conversations? Did you have something that you could show them? Did they just take your word for it? How did they trust you to do some freelance work?
Yeah, I guess that's a very good question. I think at the time, just to get the internship, I don't think they really cared. I think they just wanted a body who was not gonna slack off or do anything crazy. I mean, it was unpaid, so it didn't work. So that got me in the door. But sitting next to George and talking to him, I showed him a lot of my comic book covers of my exit portfolio stuff, and I think that resonated with him because at the time DC was a big deal for Cryptozoic, and I had a lot of faux DC covers. I did a Batman, I did a Catwoman, things like that. So I got to show him that I could draw those characters, and I had my sketchbook with me all the time back then too, a physical one where I do a lot of digital stuff on iPad now. So he got to see that stuff too, and I would doodle on lunch breaks and stuff. So I think he knew I could do it if I needed to. But then Jeff, it was really about like so in the time between graduating and when I got my freelance stuff with Jeff, I was doing a lot of like commissions or stuff for friends or whatever, and just honing and practicing like my digital illustration skills. I remember I did like this big poster for all my friend group. There were like 14 of us, and we all dressed up as like Marvel superheroes. Like there was Hulk and Elektra and Black Widow and Deadpool and Ghost Rider and Punisher and all this. And I did this big poster of everybody. You know, I drew the characters everybody dressed up. I didn't do them like in their costume. Like, I mean, you know Eric. Like it was just him in like a t-shirt with like Hulk. That's not that crazy. But doing that, it was a huge poster, and it took a long time. And I got really good at the digital illustration and painting. And he saw some of that, and oh, cool, because the first project was coloring concept art for collectibles. Like he had line art, but he didn't have any color. So he saw my colors. Oh, this. That's what it was. More and more I think about it and tell you the story. It's insanely lucky, right place, right time. Yeah, I mean, it happened to work out that the stuff that I wanted to be doing is the stuff that they were looking at. So, yeah, maybe I'm not the best person to ask, like, what was your plan? Because I had.
Well, like not like just. Do you remember? I've quoted this a lot so far in the podcast, but do you remember the Joker in The Dark Knight? He just was like a dog chasing cars. Just didn't know what he was gonna do if he caught one. He just kept doing shit. So, okay. So you really did a good job establishing yourself as someone who can get stuff done, and that's like one of the big things about being a freelancer. Like, imagine Geralt of Rivia. He does stuff.
Yeah, he does, and he's the only one who can do it. Yeah, I think also part of what got me in it with George and Jeff is that they saw me at my internship, where the who was my manager at the time, his name was also Kyle, another mutual friend. He would ask me like, "Oh, I need you to turn all of these robots. I need you to make them all red." There was this like beautiful art from these freelancers that they had illustrate, but they were the wrong color, and they were like, "I need you to make them all red by like 11." Like, cool, no problem. And then I immediately Google how to make these. Like I never asked like, "Oh, I don't know how to do that," or like any of that stuff, because like I've always had the idea, like the thought of like dumber people than I am than me have figured out how to do this stuff. Like this can't be that hard. Like the internet is this amazing tool. You can teach yourself anything in minutes, pretty much. So a lot of what my internship, like they asked me to do a lot of stuff that I wasn't necessarily prepared to do, but I figured it out immediately because it's what they asked me to do. So I did. And I sort of have some of that thought process now as well. But at the same time, like I've also been doing this long enough now that I like have accumulated enough knowledge that there's quite a bit of stuff that I think I can do now. Like I remember watching when I was growing up, there's these awesome videos of like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane like at the table drawing with and Stan Lee was interviewing while they were drawing. And we were watching them draw, and it was just like so fast. So we're gonna do this angle here behind the shoulder. We're gonna do this one, this, and it was just coming out so quickly. And Jim Lee talked about it, and he goes, at this point, like, there's not really that many angles that I haven't drawn yet, which is why I can do this so fast. And I remember thinking, like, oh man, I'll probably never get to. But after almost 10 years at this point, like the first toy job that I got from Jeff was 2015. 10 years at this point, there's not that many things I haven't done toy-wise. So I kind of understand what he's talking.
Yeah, experience just gives you the ability to be a better bounty hunter, basically. Like, your first couple bounties kind of suck, and they're because you have no idea how it's going to go. It's going to be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned earlier in the podcast how in like comic books, it's a it doesn't pay super well unless you're super fast. You mentioned you're fast, but you are
I think I'm slow.
oh, I'm sure you're faster than some people, but you now are an official toy designer at Super 7,
Mm-hmm.
and you've done freelance gave you the opportunity to probably leverage your freelance skills that you've practiced and make a little bit of money, and then leverage that to eventually get a job in the industry.
Yep.
So as a freelancer, you do have a lot of insecurities of like whether it's finding clients or being in the right market, right place, right time, versus with being on staff, you have more regular paycheck, work is constantly coming
Well,
in, you have a boss. What is that like going from like freelance to being staff, and do you enjoy that?
I do. I enjoy the security, especially like if I'm able to work from home, which I have been for the better part of 5 years now. You know, like it makes it a lot easier. I remember thinking a long time, right when I first started doing toys, I didn't really like being in the office that much, and I was like, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work in the industry. I'm gonna learn how to do everything, and then I'm gonna eventually go freelance and live wherever I want and leverage those connections to do whatever. But unfortunately, pandemic hit, had other ideas, and we all scattered to the winds and started working from home. And I realized that I kind of have both. You can have the security of health insurance, monthly paychecks, and sort of live where you want to, if you are at the right spot, the right time, in a place that allows remote work. So to be completely honest, there wasn't too much of a transition. Like I guess, yeah, I mean you know this, but I moved to the Bay for this job for a whole year, and that was rough. That was a lot. Um, and I actually I remember I kind of blew through my savings because I wasn't correctly like managing budgets and all that stuff. So it was hard in the very beginning, but then pandemic hit, and then you got to kind of go back. And I feel like this is sort of like how I thrive is I work longer hours. I'm in this office or prison of my own design here with all my stuff around me, but I get to curate that, and I get to be inspired by the things that I want, like be inspired by work on the schedule that I work on. I have a boss and all that, but I had the Cryptozoic too, or even when when you're a freelancer, you have bosses, you have your client. That's I don't think there's that much of a change in that regard. But yeah, man, that was perhaps the rambliest I've ever been in my entire life. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. No, I think because you you had this goal.
Yeah.
COVID definitely messed up a lot of people's plans, including my own.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and uh, the overall, it sounds like every COVID helped you. Would you say it was like a late allowed you to get to that like work from home lifestyle that you were looking for before COVID?
Yes, I think so. It got me there faster. That's for sure. Um, but after this long, I can see the benefit of 1 or 2 days a week in person collaboration. I can see that benefit, especially if you're on staff somewhere. Um, because it's hard. Like when you're a freelancer, the only way you really have to communicate in person with your clients is like at conventions, or you have to call in like a meeting specifically, and at that point, like you're not on staff. Like they don't really owe you anything other than the money that they said they'd pay you for the work. So it's hard to get FaceTime with your clients like that in places other than conventions. Uh, at least in my experience. So, um, yeah, I mean it's nice to be able to work from home, but every now and then seeing people's faces helps.
Mhm.
I'm not saying it's like I don't need to be there 40 hours. that's too much.
Well,
The way it's different for everybody.
I think that's a unique thing to think about because I'm someone who's always been freelance. Like I've never had a studio job, and whenever I go to conventions, whenever I go out, there is almost this like I should be working sort of experience, and there's also this sort of mindset that like everything could be a networking opportunity, and it sounds a little Machiavellian, and it kind of sucks,
Yeah.
but it's true. And it's about showing up in a meaningful, non-advantageous way to people. But like, you can just go to an event like San Diego Comic-Con and like meet people, and like you're still gonna have work after that. Versus like, I would go to like conventions and hopefully it springs up more work. And that's like one of the downsides I have as a pure freelancer. We're both fighting the same fight. We're both like artists still doing stuff, but the difference is that like you can interact with your colleagues and clients in a more friendly way versus like as a freelancer, it's almost like, hey, everything has to maybe turn into an opportunity sort of thing. Do you think
but I don't know if that's true though, because I think that those opportunities come from genuine connection. Like you definitely don't want to show up to conventions and be like, oh great, Jags is here, like he's gonna ask me for money, or look, you want to try and have genuine connection so that when you do show up, you're like, oh hell yeah, Jags is here, like let's go drink, let's go party, like Jags is here, it's gonna be a good time. Because when they think of like, you, and they think of, oh yeah, like Jags rules, like he's the best, I should give him that work because he's good and he's nice to work with. Like I find that kind of genuine connection, like I one, it's people enjoy working with their friends more, and like two, like people, just like they like working with people that they like, like if you show up and it's like, oh man, the Jags is gonna hound me for work or whatever, like I don't know, I realize that maybe it's a privileged position to take, but I don't know, I feel like you kind of gotta go to these conventions and like if work comes out of it, great. If no work comes out of it, great. Like it's fine. I got to see my friends Ben, who I never get to see. Like that's the good part. And again, I like I said, I think that perhaps that's a privilege some people don't have as freelancers. But I think that if you can get to that point, then the work will flow to you. Does that make sense?
So I have a question for you then.
Yeah.
Because so early on, the story you were telling me earlier was that you went to these events like the Magic the Gathering thing. You were friendly with George. You were friendly with Jeff, and you obviously built up some rapport with those people. So first off, how did you develop those skills to be a freelance artist that like does stuff, but you also were able to build rapport? So like, where did you build those like charisma skills? And then also, how did you build and maintain your reputation as someone who is a good artist, but also good to work with?
I don't know. I don't really think about it that much. That I wish I could tell you that there's like a secret to it. But I also genuinely believe that there's some people who, again, it's going to sound dumb or crass or what have you, but I think some people have it and some people don't. Like you can learn it, but I don't have a good resource for you because I feel like I didn't do anything different. Does that make sense? Like the skills that I learned as a freelancer are like budgeting and invoicing and corporate speak, like that kind of stuff. The like making friends and like genuine connections thing kind of came naturally to me. And that, I think I credit a lot of that to my dad, who worked sales for 30 years at Hitachi and was president of his own fraternity and just has the gift of gab, and I think he passed that down to me. I also, at the time, it sucked, but I also want to thank every single best friend I ever had from second grade until high school for moving away the year that I met them. So it forced me as a kid to be very social and learn to make friends, or else I was gonna just not have friends at all. So all of that stuff, like that, built up my charisma skills. But I don't really thought that hard about like, oh well, if I say this, then they'll do this, like, because then that's pure manipulation in my book, and that's not how you form genuine connections. That's not how people like will think of you when they.
You know, I'm glad you said the word charisma because it stirred in my head. Like in Dungeons and Dragons or other games, the charisma is just a broad stat of 1 to 20. It sounds like you are on the higher end of your charisma stats. What would you say that number would be?
Don't make me choose, man. I don't want to.
Okay.
I don't want to do that.
You're at least a +1 modifier for your charisma.
Sure. We'll say +1.
Now, I think the reason why I share this is in games like Fallout or Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic or Mass Effect or any game where there's a morality checker, it sounds like you have been able to use your charisma in a way that is more light side, more Paragon, more...
Sure, yeah.
And would you say that, like... and some people believe that, like, nice guys finish last and all that. And I think that's not how it works. I think in the real world, like being genuinely light side, Paragon, good to work with. How do you know as a freelancer or as an artist who could potentially help someone, how do you know to stand up for yourself and be able to also like make the right choice on behalf of your client and or your boss or whatever, and also the work and also yourself, because it's really easy to become taken advantage of as an artist.
Oh yeah, it truly is. I think a lot of it comes from knowing your worth. So understanding budgets, understanding, what your kind of hourly burn rate, what you think you're worth, all that stuff is, and like sticking to it, and to me, there's like a scale a little bit as well of like, man, I really don't want to do this, so I'm going to charge. If I really don't want to do this, I'm going to charge more money. If I like really want to do this, then I will charge less because I want to do it. And that's it's kind of like an intuition thing. It just kind of comes from years of interacting with people and those charisma and skill checks, right? You can usually have like a gut feeling. You're like, oh, that dude is. For me, like it probably sounds bad, but I usually make pretty snap judgments that usually stick the landing. Like for a long time, like pretty much within like half an hour, I can understand whether or not I'm getting along with somebody, and it almost always works out. Yeah, I don't know. Another part of it is like I don't really have like a 3 strikes rule, but like when somebody's like, oh, I'll get that thing to you, okay, well, that deadline goes by. It's like, oh, but hey, like you saw that thing, like yeah, I got it. I'll get it to you in a sec. That also goes by. And you're like, yeah, hey, do you have that thing? Like, oh yeah, don't even sweat it. Like, don't worry about it. Like when people start telling you like, hey, don't worry about it, man. Like I got you. Like figure it out. Like, but it's like multiple times. Like 1 time, 2 times. Like sure, whatever. Life happens. People get busy. But like, it's like just like it's like a pattern of behavior, And the other thing that like sticks with me is like I've had people like tell me stuff like when. That like, oh, like, hey, just like go have a drink, don't sweat it, like it'll be there tomorrow, like cool. And it's like no, don't tell me what to do. Like we are now like 6 months past what we talked about, like all this stuff. Like usually that's when it's like, okay, like the defense mechanisms kind of naturally kick in. Again, I feel very bad that I don't have like a guide on like how to teach you how to like stick up for yourself. It's really just like hey, I don't like how I got treated, Nate. So I'm gonna do something about it. It's like an instinct. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of, yeah.
It sounds like you have a lot of confidence on being able to know when you don't like how someone is treating you, and you can just say that very matter of factly, like this person treats me poorly. I don't want them in my life anymore.
Pretty true. Yeah. I don't have a great way of like saying that to that person though. I'm pretty known to like, I think if we went through, a couple of these examples, if we read through the emails, it would be like, wow, like here's all these flowery, wordy, like, awesome, like, oh, so great to work with you, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And then like, as they start being shadier and shadier, like my emails start getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Give you what I told you to. The end.
Right.
Like that's it.
Right.
Like the pleasantries fade over time. So, but yeah, it's I think, I don't know. There's kind of like an insight check that you can run. That's pretty like, I don't know. It's guided me pretty well so far.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like what you're saying is to be a half decent freelancer, you should ideally have some modifier for your charisma and also some modifier for your perception to know whether an
Charisma
opportunity,
and intelligence, yeah, for sure.
yeah, because like you can just be a barbarian brute force stuff, but if you can't communicate, those are some of the it hard get job.
Yeah, and I've been told in lectures and stuff like that you need two of three things. You can be good, fast, or cheap. If you have two of those, then you'll never you'll always have work. But like, I don't necessarily think that's true. I think you kind of need to have all 3 if you really want to make it, because then you truly will always be employed.
Right.
But I think there's other ways to make sure that you're employed. Diversify your skills and that kind of stuff. And you and I have talked about sort of what that looks like. You kind of want to have, and my dad taught me this actually, want to try and have anywhere from 4 to 6 different ways to earn income, because when one type of job dries up, the other will spring.
Well, that actually is a good segue to what I was thinking. Like the uncertainty of freelancing. In my last podcast, like having multiple streams of income as a staff artist, you most of your time is the staff job. So, and with not all jobs, like I hope all jobs are secure, but sometimes they're not. So, how do you deal with the uncertainty that like having other revenue streams to help reduce that? How do you deal with the why did you leave the uncertainty of freelancing to have the job security of Super 7? And are you doing things to help ensure your security for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty of stuff you can do. I think, once you get that job at the studio or whatever, or from freelance, like your networking doesn't stop. Like I know that it's kind of the opposite of what artists want to hear, because a lot of them like to be sequestered doing the art, doing the work, and not talking to people. But networking is a lifelong journey, not a like it's not a messenger quest. It's not a delivery. It is you will constantly be growing your network and making connections with people, because you never know next work is going to come from. So, for me, it's forming genuine connections with other people in the industry. I've been very fortunate enough to get to know some of the best people kind of in the toy industry, and really genuinely call them my friends. And half the time, like not even half the time, 90% of the time when I talk to them, it's not even about toys. It's like, oh, hey, like, how's your kid doing? You told me he was sick last night. Feeling better? Like, that kind of stuff. Just checking in. I always try and remember people's birthdays, because for me, like, I love my birthday. Birthday's super important to me. I realize how annoying that can be for some people, but everybody likes being remembered. Everybody likes to feel important. and your birthday is literally the one day a year that's like about you. So I try to remember people's birthdays, send them a little text message, give them a call, something like that. Phones nowadays, you can update your contacts to have people's birthdays in them. Like, it's very easy, and it'll remind you when it's someone's birthday. So it becomes, after a while, it becomes kind of a self-sustaining reminder system that helps you kind of network with people. So, there's your tip. Remember people's birthdays.
I 100% agree. As a freelancer, be just really friendly, and the most friendly thing you can do is send them a message on their birthday without expecting anything in return. Just be good to work with and be really friendly.
Yep. Instead.
Okay.
What was that? Well, what else was what was the other part of the question?
So, networking was you mentioned that networking was a constant, whether you're
how
staff
do
or
I
freelance.
stop? All right, I got it. And then honing my skills or whatever. But I actually used to remember thinking when I was trying to apply for jobs how hopeless I felt because the people who were applying for these jobs already had staff positions at other studios, and so therefore they were constantly working all the time for these studios, and therefore they were practicing all the time and getting good. Whereas I didn't have a studio, so I love to play video games, I love to do all that other kind of stuff, and like I wasn't practicing as much as these other professionals. And I remember worrying about that, and so I tried to make sure at that time that I was constantly practicing. And now that I am a professional and I'm doing studio stuff, like I do feel that benefit of like, your job is to draw, so it's not like you're going to be out of practice. So I think for me now, it's just about like kind of curating what's good in your portfolio, what's not, just switching stuff in and out. Kind of about every 6 months, I'll look through what's in there and put some new stuff in, take some old stuff out, things like that. And yeah, just networking. Like not too long ago, we had some furloughs here, which just kind of temporarily laid everybody off for like a week or so. And so it affected, everybody's income, which sucks. But, that's the toy industry's kind of going through some changes right now. And to make up that revenue, I was very fortunate. But my friend Dave over at Tweeterhead asked me to help him out with some statues. And at the time, it was a totally non-conflict whatsoever because they do $100 plus statues on brands that Super 7 didn't even work on. So and I technically didn't even work for them during that week. So I was like, all right, yeah, let's do that. And so I got very fortunate, and I was able to supplement that lost income during that time period, thanks to my genuine connection with my friend Dave, who I think actually remembered to ask me because I wished him back. So, yeah, that's just an example. I got very fortunate that it came to me.
What that tells me is like, if you're an actual bounty hunter or a freelancer in a magical fantasy world, you're always going to trust the person who's constantly getting work and fighting. Like you see them on the battle, or they're walking out of the other dungeon entrance, and you're like, oh hey, he's doing stuff, and they're in the tavern, healing up and all that. And it sounds like no matter what, you've always just stayed very active in the industry, and that's helped you stay as like a relevant artist in the industry that can be trusted.
Tried to, yeah. And if I'm not, then my friends are active artists in the industry. So even if I'm not one, I at least am associated with people that are. And that's not to say like, oh, I'm using them for my gain. It's like I make sure that I am visible around them in their spheres, genuinely. It's so difficult to talk about networking without sounding like a complete. But
I agree. But
it's important.
I think just being a good person. And like let's be real, Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, he is a good person. He may not have the top charisma, but he's a good person and good morals.
Yeah. for sure.
And I think that's the most important thing. Yeah, he's very good
Yeah.
at what he does, and he's very expensive. But
Yeah. Well, that's I don't know. That's the thing. Like when I technically am networking, like I'm not thinking about it at all.
Mhm.
The only time I ever think about networking is when I do podcasts like this and people ask me, "Oh, yeah, I guess that's something I do all the time." But and then I get asked how to explain it, and I can't because I literally put zero thought into it. I'm not thinking about it when it's happening.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to do and make cool stuff with people I like,
Mhm.
and that's it.
Mhm.
I wish there was a better answer for it. Like there is no secret sauce. It is just being yourself, and yeah.
Mhm.
Bam.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you've shared with us a lot of really good nuggets on like what it's like to be a freelancer and staff, and it really just comes down to being a good person to work with. You have to develop the skills, obviously, and you've obviously been very successful in the toy industry to make a name for yourself as someone who is reliable.
Mm-hmm. I've
So
certainly gotten very fortunate to be able to do that. At this point, I think it really is just finding genuine connections, and I think people see me talking to my friends like you or my friend other YouTube podcasts and stuff, or talking at conventions, and just kind of giving people the time of day to talk about the things that they like and I like.
mhm,
I'm passionate about all this stuff too. Actually,
mhm.
there's time to pay it forward to it.
Yeah, I think the pay it forward part, I think, is like how all of us as freelancers, we're always trying to give more than we receive most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I would like to end today's podcast. I'm sure you have a D20 on your desk somewhere.
On my desk, no. I have my bag here.
Okay, let's get your D20. So he took his headphones off, but we're gonna do the D20 dice roll.
Let's see.
So at the end of every podcast,
Yeah.
I do a D20 roll, and I think what is most relevant to this is I'd like you to make a charisma check.
Okay.
Are we doing
So-
+1? Is that
Yeah, well, plus one.
what we decided? That's what we
Plus
decided
one.
as a modifier.
Yep.
All right. So I have this is my very special D20. If you hit a 20, it lights up.
Ooh, okay, that's cool.
So we'll see.
All right, +1 charisma roll. Let's see.
12.
12,
So
okay.
13. Right, middle of the road.
Yeah,
It'll convince most commoners, but a noble it might not work.
yeah. So it's just a know when to be charismatic and know when to just show up and do the work. So, well, Kyle, thank you so much for being on my podcast today, and I hope that your next project, whether it's freelance or staff, is amazing, and that your next D&D session goes very well and the dice roll in your favor.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for that blessing of luck thing.
My pleasure. All right, everyone, take care, and thank you for listening to the Creative Adventure Podcast.